I never thought my life could shatter so suddenly. It wasn't like in the movies, where the truth reveals itself in slow, dramatic glances. No, it hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest, a sharp, suffocating pain that knocked the air out of my lungs. It started on an ordinary Wednesday evening. The air smelled of rain, and the sound of my husband's keys jangling in the front door echoed through the house. I glanced up from the couch, smiling automatically, but something felt off the moment he stepped inside. He looked distracted, his eyes darting around like he was searching for an excuse before he even saw me. "Rough day?" I asked casually, watching as he loosened his tie. "Yeah, you could say that," he muttered, tossing his briefcase onto the chair. He walked over to kiss me, but his eyes didn't meet mine. I noticed it, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. About an hour later, as I stood in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner, his phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced over, not out of suspicion but out of habit. The screen lit up with a text message from someone named Tyler. Work. Tyler, work. Good job today, Martin. You really sold it in the meeting. My hand froze on the knife. My mind immediately snagged on one word. Martin. Martin. I frowned. I picked up the phone, reading the message again, making sure I hadn't misread it. No, it was clear as day. Martin. Not Ethan. Not my husband's name. Ethan. I called out, forcing calm into my voice. Yeah. He responded from the living room, his voice distant as if he were half listening. I walked into the room, holding his phone in my hand. Who's Martin? He looked up at me, his face going completely blank. For a split second, just a flicker of a moment, I saw it panic. But it was gone so fast that I almost questioned if I'd imagined it. He leaned back on the couch, rubbing his hands over his face like he was exhausted. Oh, that, he chuckled nervously. It's nothing. It's just a nickname at work. A nickname? I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, he shrugged, picking up the remote. You know how it is. Office jokes, inside references. It's stupid, really. I stood there, staring at him, trying to read between the lines of his voice. He sounded convincing. Too convincing. Like he'd rehearsed it. Since when do you have a nickname at work? I asked, folding my arms. Since forever, babe. He didn't even look at me this time, his eyes glued to the TV. It's not a big deal. I let it go, at least that's what I wanted him to believe. But the name Martin stayed with me like a splinter under my skin. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying Tyler's message and the way Ethan's face had gone rigid for just a moment too long. My instincts were telling me something wasn't right. And I'd learned to trust my instincts. The next day, while Ethan was at work, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I opened a browser and stared at the search bar, my fingers hovering over the keys. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Martin. That wasn't enough. Martin and Tyler work nickname. No, that was ridiculous. Then, without thinking, I typed it. Martin dating site. The search results loaded, and my heart began to race. The first link that caught my eye was for a site I'd heard of before. A dating site for people looking for something discreet. My heart pounded in my chest as I clicked on it. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but I knew deep down that I was going to find something. I entered Martin into the search bar, holding my breath like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. Took a few seconds, but there it was. Martin 38. Looking for something exciting and new. My hands went numb. My eyes locked onto the picture next to the name. It was him. Ethan. My husband. Smiling, charming, with that stupid grin I'd fallen in love with. My heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest. It wasn't just the name that betrayed him. It was the bio. Looking for something exciting and new. Am I not exciting? Am I not enough? I sat there staring at the screen, the tears coming before I could stop them. But I didn't let myself cry for long. No. Crying was for the weak. I wiped my face and pulled myself together. If he thought I was going to crumble, he was dead wrong. If he wanted to play games, I could play them too. I created a fake profile. Her name was Emily, and she was everything I knew Ethan couldn't resist. Playful, flirtatious, with just the right mix of confidence and mystery. I uploaded a photo of a woman I found online. Someone pretty but not too perfect. I spent the next 2 days messaging him, laying on the charm, playing the role of the perfect stranger. It didn't take long for him to fall for it. He messaged me first. Hey, you seem fun. What's a girl like you doing on here? I stared at the message, my fingers trembling with rage. What's a man like you doing on here, Ethan? I played along, responding as Emily, and soon we were talking every day. Each message from him was like a dagger to my heart, but I kept going. I told myself I needed to see it through. I needed to see how far he'd go. And then it happened. Martin. You seem like the kind of woman I'd love to have dinner with. He asked me out. My husband asked his mystery woman out. I took a deep breath and typed back. Emily. I'd love that. Name the place. He named it. A restaurant downtown. Classy, quiet, intimate. A place he'd never once taken me. That night I sat at home, staring at my reflection in the mirror, trying to convince myself not to go. But I had to. I had to see it with my own eyes. I got dressed in the red dress he used to love on me. I styled my hair, put on makeup and looked at myself with new eyes. You're stronger than you think you are, I told myself. When I arrived at the restaurant, my heart was in my throat. I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting at a table for two, his eyes scanning the entrance like a man waiting for his next thrill. He looked so calm, so at ease, like he wasn't destroying everything we'd built together. I walked toward him slowly, every step measured, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. People glanced up as I passed, but I didn't care. I was focused on him. His eyes flickered up, and when he saw me, his face went pale, white as a ghost. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Expecting someone else? I asked, tilting my head like I was just another woman on a date. He stammered, eyes darting around like he was trying to find an exit. Sit down, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. My voice was cold, steady. You wanted dinner with Emily, didn't you? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Surprise, I said with a smile so sharp it could have cut him. Emily sends her regards. I leaned forward, looking him dead in the eye. You have two options, Ethan. You can lie to me again, or you can finally tell me the truth. He swallowed hard, his eyes locked on mine, the weight of everything crashing down on him. Your move, Martin. He sat there, frozen like a man caught in a trap with no way out. His eyes darted around the restaurant, looking for an escape, a miracle, something, anything, that could save him from what was about to come. But there was no escape. Not this time. Lauren, please, he finally muttered, leaning forward, his hands flat on the table. His voice was low, urgent, like he was afraid someone might overhear. It's not what you think. I tilted my head, giving him a look so sharp it could have sliced through stone. Oh? Then what is it, Ethan? Enlighten me. I leaned forward, my voice as calm as the eye of a storm. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my husband has been living a second life as Martin, a charming bachelor searching for something exciting and new. I threw his own words back at him and I saw the impact land. His flinch was barely noticeable, but I saw it. Lauren, He stopped himself, his jaw tightening. I could see the gears turning in his head, searching for an excuse, a story that might save him. Don't. I raised a hand, stopping him cold. Don't lie to me. You've already done enough of that. The only thing I want from you right now is the truth. Just once. The truth. He sat back in his chair, rubbing his face with both hands like he could scrub away the guilt. I watched him, my heart a hurricane of pain and rage. But I stayed still. I stayed in control. Okay, he said, his voice raw now. Okay. He exhaled slowly, dragging his hands down his face, revealing eyes that looked older than I'd ever seen them. I'm not proud of it, Lauren. I'm not. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Not proud of it? Wow, Ethan, that's really comforting. I'm sure all those lonely nights you spent messaging Emily must have been so difficult for you. Please, he said, his voice cracking. Please just listen. I'm not in love with anyone else. I never met up with anyone. I swear. I raised an eyebrow, staring at him like he was a complete stranger. But you wanted to, didn't you? You were ready to meet Emily tonight. You were ready to cheat on me. My voice shook despite how hard I tried to stay steady. My hands were hidden under the table, fingers digging into my thighs to keep from trembling. His mouth opened, but no words came out. And that silence, it was louder than any confession. It was the moment I knew. Knew that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overthinking, that I hadn't imagined all those moments when his phone buzzed, and he'd suddenly tilted away from my view. All those late nights at work, that suddenly made sense. "Lauren," he said finally, his voice hollow. "I don't know why I did it." I leaned forward, hands flat on the table, my eyes locked on his. "Oh, I know why," I hissed. "Because you wanted to feel powerful, special, desired. Because it's not enough to have a wife who loves you, sacrifices for you, builds a life with you. No, you needed strangers online to stroke your ego, to tell you you're still exciting." My voice was razor sharp, cutting through every excuse before he could even form one. "Lauren, it wasn't like that," he said quickly, but we both knew it was exactly like that. "Then tell me, Ethan," I said, my voice low, dangerous. "What was it like? Tell me what you told them. Tell me what Martin wanted that Ethan didn't have." He didn't answer. He just sat there, staring at me like a man watching his house burn down, knowing there's nothing he can do to save it. I nodded slowly, letting the silence sink in. "That's what I thought." I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow, shaky breath. I didn't realize I'd been holding it for so long. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Here's the thing, Ethan," I said, folding my arms. "I'm not stupid. I know that whatever you're about to say is only going to be half the truth. You'll try to minimize it. You'll say it wasn't serious, that you never crossed the line, that it was just harmless fun. But you and I both know that's a lie." I leaned forward again, my eyes narrowing. "Cheating doesn't start in a hotel room, Ethan. It starts here." I tapped my finger against my temple. "In your mind. The moment you decided you deserved more than what you already had." He lowered his head, eyes on the table, like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. But I wasn't going to give him the comfort of looking away from me. "Look at me," I said firmly. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly raised his eyes to meet mine. "I need to know one thing," I said, holding his gaze, my voice steady but icy. "Did you ever meet with anyone?" His eyes searched mine, and for a moment I thought he might try to lie. I saw the flicker of it, the way his lips pressed together like he was choosing his words carefully. But something in him must have realized there was no way out of this. No version of the truth that wouldn't burn him to the ground. "No," he said softly. "I never met anyone." I stared at him, looking for cracks in his story, any sign that he was lying. But this time I believed him. I believed him not because I trusted him, but because I knew he wasn't brave enough to face the mess he'd made in person. "Congratulations," I said with a bitter laugh. "You've earned half a point for not being that kind of coward." He winced, and I felt a strange, hollow satisfaction from it. I wanted him to feel it. I wanted him to know how deeply he'd hurt me. We sat there in silence for a while. Other couples around us laughed, clinked wine glasses, shared quiet conversations. It felt like we were in a different world from them. One where the air was thick with betrayal and everything felt too sharp, too raw. "What happens now?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at him for a long time, really looked at him. This was the man I'd built a life with, the man I trusted with everything. And here he was, exposed for who he really was, selfish, weak, and desperate for attention from strangers. I didn't know if I felt rage, heartbreak, or just emptiness. Maybe it was all of them. I didn't answer him right away. I wanted to. I wanted to stand up and announce that I was done, that I'd pack my things and leave him to live his exciting new life as Martin. But I knew better than to make decisions in the heat of the moment. So I stood up slowly, every movement deliberate. I grabbed my purse, draping it over my shoulder. His eyes widened, his mouth opening as if he was about to beg. "Don't," I said quietly, holding up a hand. "Don't follow me. Don't call me. Don't text me." I leaned in close, so close I could smell his cologne. "I'm going to decide what happens next. Me. Not you. And when I decide, you'll know." I pulled back, staring him down one last time. "Enjoy your dinner, Martin," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "I hope it's everything you wanted." And with that I walked away. I didn't turn around. Not once. When I stepped outside, the cold night air hit me like a shock, filling my lungs with something sharp and clean. I breathed it in deeply, letting it replace all the stale, suffocating air I'd been breathing inside that restaurant. For the first time in a long time I felt clear. I didn't know what would come next. But for once it would be my choice. Not his. Not Martin's. Mine. I stood outside the restaurant for a moment, my breath clouding the cool night air. The streetlights cast long shadows on the wet pavement, and the distant hum of cars passing by filled the silence. I watched my reflection in the restaurant window, the woman staring back at me, a stranger in so many ways. Her eyes were sharp, cold, her posture rigid, like she was holding everything in by sheer force of will. Was this who I'd become? Or had she always been there, buried under years of compromise, patience, and blind faith in a man who didn't deserve it? I didn't cry. Not here. Not where someone might see me. My tears would not be for public consumption. No, if I cried tonight, it would be on my own terms. Somewhere safe. Somewhere I could fall apart and put myself back together again without anyone watching. The ache in my chest was unbearable. Like something vital had been ripped from me. I felt hollow and full at the same time. Hollow from loss, but full of anger, rage, and the kind of clarity that only comes after you've seen the truth up close. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go home. Not yet. I started walking. Not in any particular direction, just letting my feet carry me. The city lights blurred as I moved, each step feeling heavier than the last. My mind was racing, thoughts colliding in a storm of disbelief, fury, and deep, deep sadness. I kept replaying his face in my head, that flash of panic when he saw me, the pathetic look of shame as he realized he'd been caught. What made it worse was how small he looked. I'd always seen Ethan as strong, confident, someone I could lean on when life got hard. But tonight he wasn't a man at all. He was a child caught in a lie, scrambling to explain himself. How long had he been like that? Had I just refused to see it? I stopped at a crosswalk, my fingers gripping the strap of my purse so tightly my knuckles turned white. The little red hand on the signal blinked at me, as if telling me to stop, to think, to breathe. I watched it for a moment, waiting for it to change, but it didn't. Just that same blinking red hand. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. It sounded like footsteps behind me, and suddenly I felt it. That creeping, crawling sensation at the back of my neck. The feeling of being watched. I turned my head slowly, my eyes scanning the street behind me. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Just a couple walking hand in hand, a man on his phone, a car waiting at the light. Normal. Everything looked normal. But normal didn't feel like this. I turned back to face the crosswalk, and my reflection in the glass window of a nearby store caught my eye. My heart stopped. Behind me across the street, there he was. Ethan. He was standing near the edge of the sidewalk, his phone in one hand, his eyes locked on me. My breath hitched. He wasn't moving, wasn't calling out to me, just watching. His face wasn't the pleading, desperate face I'd seen in the restaurant. No, this face was something else. It was blank. Hollow. A man assessing damage. I stared at him through the reflection, and for a moment, neither of us moved. I knew what he was thinking. I knew him too well not to. He wasn't going to chase me, not outright. He'd follow. Quietly. Carefully. He'd give me space, wait for me to calm down, and then he'd play his role, the regretful husband, the man who just made a mistake but still loves his wife. He'd wait for me to be vulnerable. He'd wait for me to be soft again. Not tonight. The crosswalk light changed, the little white figure glowing on the opposite side. I didn't hesitate. I stepped into the street, walking quickly but not too quickly.
No sudden movements.
I didn't want him to know I'd seen him. I didn't want him to know that I knew exactly what he was doing. My mind was racing. I could feel him behind me, his presence like a weight on my back. He wasn't close, but he was there. Watching. Following. I made a decision then and there. I wasn't going to be the woman who runs home, locks the door, and waits for the confrontation. No, I wasn't going to be that woman. I'd been that woman for too long. Ignoring signs, brushing aside instincts, forgiving when I should have walked away. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing past my phone. I pulled it out, keeping my eyes forward as I unlocked it. I typed quickly, my heart pounding in time with each keystroke. Me text to Sarah. Are you home? I need a place to stay tonight. Sarah was my best friend. She didn't ask questions. She didn't pry. She just showed up. A reply came within seconds. Sarah. Of course. Come over. I'll make tea. There. God, I didn't realize how much I needed something warm and kind until I read those words. I glanced behind me just once, just long enough to see that Ethan was still following me. His eyes met mine, and this time he knew. He knew that I knew. My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. I didn't break eye contact. For once I didn't feel scared. I felt something else entirely. I felt power. He had spent years believing he was the one with the upper hand. That I wouldn't see, that I wouldn't ask, that I wouldn't leave. But now I saw everything. And he knew it. I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the slightest shift in his stance. It was small, but I caught it. I smiled at him. Not a big smile. Not a kind smile. Just a small, knowing curve of my lips. The kind of smile you give to someone who's already lost but doesn't know it yet. I turned back around, walking faster now. Not toward home but toward Sarah's place. The city moved around me, strangers passing by. Cars honking in the distance. Everything felt louder, sharper. My senses were heightened in a way they'd never been before. I wasn't just walking down the street. I was claiming it. Every step forward felt like another link in the chain being broken. He didn't follow me this time. I checked once, just once, glancing over my shoulder at the next street corner. He was still on the other side of the block, standing there like he didn't know what to do next. His phone was in his hand, but he wasn't calling anyone. He was just staring at me. Good. Let him. Let him watch me walk away. Let him remember this moment. I reached Sarah's apartment 20 minutes later, my legs aching from how fast I'd been walking. She was already at the door when I got there, her eyes wide with worry. "What happened?" she asked, pulling me inside. Her arms went around me before I could answer, and for the first time that night, I let myself breathe. I felt my body go slack, every muscle releasing the weight it had been carrying. I clung to her like a lifeline, my eyes burning with tears I refused to shed. "Ethan," I whispered into her shoulder. "He's not who I thought he was." Her grip on me tightened, her chin resting on top of my head. "Then he's a fool," she said softly, her voice filled with the kind of steel I needed to hear. We sat on her couch, wrapped in blankets and sipping tea that I could barely taste. She didn't push me to talk, didn't press for details. She just stayed there with me, her presence like an anchor in a storm. At some point I reached for my phone. I stared at Ethan's number, my thumb hovering over it for a long, long time. The weight of every moment, every lie, every excuse he'd ever given me pressed down on my chest. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. Instead, I opened my contacts, scrolled to his name and hit block. My heart didn't ache this time. It didn't break. It didn't shatter. It just went quiet. Peaceful. Steady. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was the one in control. The next morning, I woke up on Sarah's couch, my body tangled in a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. My eyes blinked against the soft morning light filtering in through the curtains, and for a few blissful seconds, I forgot everything. I forgot the night before. I forgot Ethan. I forgot Martin. But then, like an unwelcome guest barging through the door, it all came flooding back. My heart didn't break this time. No. It hardened. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes as I glanced around Sarah's apartment. It was quiet except for the faint clinking sounds coming from the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted in, rich and warm, and for a moment, I just sat there breathing it in. Felt good. It felt normal. "Morning, Sleeping Beauty," Sarah's voice called from the kitchen. Her tone was light, but I could hear the underlying concern. "Morning," I replied, my voice rough from sleep. I pulled the blanket off, stretching my legs until my toes tingled with pins and needles. "Coffee?" she asked, already pouring me a cup. "God, yes," I muttered, standing and walking toward her like a moth drawn to a flame. The kitchen was small but cozy, with little plants lining the windowsill and magnets from every city Sarah had ever visited covering the fridge. It was so her. A place that felt lived in, warm and honest. She slid the mug toward me, watching me with those sharp, knowing eyes of hers. Sarah didn't ask questions right away. She never did. She knew how to wait. I took a sip of the coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest like a bomb. For a few minutes we stood there in comfortable silence, the only sound the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the soft clinking of her spoon against the counter. "You look like you didn't kill him," she said finally, glancing at me over her cup. "Not yet," I muttered, taking another sip. Her lips twitched into a small smile. Want to tell me what happened? Or do you want to sit in silence and pretend the world isn't burning? I exhaled slowly, setting the cup down. He's been living a double life, Sarah. A whole other person. He's not Ethan at work. He's Martin. Her brow furrowed, and she leaned forward, her eyes narrowing in confusion. Martin. I nodded, staring down at my coffee like it held all the answers. That's what his coworkers call him. Except it's not just some stupid work nickname. He's using it on dating sites too. He had a whole profile with pictures, a fake bio, the whole thing. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. And guess who he tried to ask out on a date? Her eyes widened.
No.
Oh yes, I said, my voice laced with venom. Me. He asked me out. Except he thought I was someone named Emily. A woman I made up to catch him. Her face twisted into something between disgust and fury. Please tell me you confronted him. I did, I said, smiling coldly at the memory. At the restaurant where he was waiting for Emily. I sat down right in front of him and made him squirm. Sarah leaned back, grinning like I just told her the best story she'd ever heard. Good for you. God, I wish I could have seen his face. You should have, I muttered, tapping the edge of my cup. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. I could see him calculating every possible excuse, every lie, but I didn't give him a chance. I made it clear that I knew everything. And then, she pressed, her voice tinged with anticipation. I left, I said simply. Didn't give him the satisfaction of some big emotional meltdown. I told him I'd decide what happens next. I glanced at her, eyes steady now. And I'm still deciding. Sarah was quiet for a moment, her eyes scanning my face. She nodded slowly, her fingers tapping the side of her mug. You're stronger than I would have been, she said. If it were me, there'd be flames and broken glass involved. Don't think I didn't consider it, I muttered, taking another sip. She watched me for a long moment, her gaze softer now, more thoughtful. So, what are you going to do? I set the mug down, staring into the dark surface of the coffee like it could show me the future. I don't know yet. It was the truth. Part of me wanted to burn it all down. Walk away. Block his number. File for divorce. Be done with it. But another part of me, a quieter, angrier part, didn't want to just walk away. I wanted him to feel it. I wanted him to sit in the mess he made and realize that everything crumbling around him was his fault. I'd given him love, loyalty, patience. I'd given him everything. And he'd decided that wasn't enough. Do you think he'll try to contact you? Sarah asked, pulling me from my thoughts. I shrugged. Probably. But I blocked him. Her eyes lit up with pride. That's what I like to hear. We spent the rest of the morning talking about everything except Ethan. It felt good to laugh again, to feel normal, even if it was just for a little while. But the peace didn't last. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed on the counter. Not a text. A call. From an unknown number. I knew before I even picked it up. Sarah glanced at me, her eyes narrowing. Don't answer. I know, I said, staring at the screen. But my fingers hovered over it anyway. I hated that I still felt the pull. I hated that some part of me still needed to hear his voice. The call ended, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Seconds later, another call came in. Same number. Sarah reached over, snatching the phone from the counter. Nope, she said, her voice firm as she hit the red decline button. He doesn't get to invade your peace. I smiled weakly. Thanks. You don't thank me for doing the bare minimum, she said, giving me a pointed look. You deserve better than this, Lauren. So much better. Her words echoed in my mind long after she said them. I replayed them as I packed an overnight bag, as I brushed my teeth, as I lay on her guest bed later that night, staring up at the ceiling. Did I deserve better? Yes. Yes, I did. The next few days were quiet, but Ethan didn't stop. He tried calling from other numbers. I knew it was him. No one else would be that persistent. He didn't leave messages. He didn't text. Just call after call after call. By the end of the week, I had 20 missed calls from unknown numbers. On the 6th day, I unblocked his number. Not because I forgave him. Not because I missed him. I just wanted to see what he'd do. Within minutes, a text came through. Ethan, can we talk? I stared at it, my chest tightening. But this time it wasn't pain. It was control. I have the power now, I realized. He's the one chasing me. I didn't reply. An hour later, another message came through. Ethan, please. Just 5 minutes. I could practically hear his voice. I could hear the desperation, the same tone he'd used the night I sat across from him at that restaurant. But 5 minutes wouldn't change anything. 5 minutes wouldn't undo the lies. I turned off my phone and tossed it to the side. The next morning I called a lawyer. Not because I was sure I was ready to divorce him, but because I wanted to know what it would take. I wanted to know every option, every angle. No more guessing. No more waiting. No more giving him control. When I got off the phone, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. This time I didn't see a stranger. I saw me. Not someone's wife. Not someone's second choice. Just me. And that was more than enough. The next few weeks were a test of patience, strength, and restraint. Ethan didn't stop trying to reach me. Calls, texts, emails. All of them laced with the same desperate energy. We need to talk. Can we please fix this? I made a mistake, but we can work through it. Mistake. That word made me laugh every time I read it. A mistake is forgetting to lock the front door or accidentally burning dinner. What Ethan did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A series of choices, actually. Every time he opened that app, every message he sent, every lie he told, choices. And I wasn't going to forget that. I didn't reply. Not once. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my own life. It wasn't easy. It never is. People love to talk about starting over like it's some beautiful, clean process. It's not. It's messy. It's terrifying. It's waking up every morning with that pit in your stomach and telling yourself, get up. Just get up. And you do. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Because if you stay down too long, you'll never get back up again. Sarah was a lifeline during those days. She didn't just offer me a place to stay. She reminded me of who I was before Ethan. Before I molded myself to fit into his world. Before I softened my edges to keep the peace. You used to be so sharp, she said one night while we sat on the couch eating takeout. Back in college, nobody could tell you anything. You had opinions, and you didn't care who didn't like them. I smiled at that. Yeah, well, I guess I got tired of always fighting. You didn't stop fighting, she said, giving me a look that could burn through concrete. You just stopped fighting for yourself. Her words stuck with me long after she went to bed. I sat there in the quiet, replaying it over and over. She was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd made Ethan's happiness my full-time job. I made myself smaller to make him feel bigger. And he'd loved it. Of course he did. People like Ethan thrive on that kind of power. But that version of me was gone. I wasn't small anymore. I'd outgrown him, and I think that's what scared him the most. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the night at the restaurant, I got a message from an unknown number. This time it wasn't a plea. It wasn't an apology. It was a threat. If you won't talk to me, I'll come find you. My chest tightened, but not with fear. With rage. I sat there staring at the message, my blood boiling hotter with every second. He thought he could scare me into coming back. He thought I'd fold just because he'd raised the stakes. He was wrong. So wrong. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I took a screenshot of the message and sent it directly to my lawyer. Me to lawyer. This counts as harassment, right? His reply came within minutes. Lawyer. Yes. I'll file a restraining order first thing tomorrow. Do you feel safe right now? Did I feel safe? I thought about that for a while. I was at Sarah's place, surrounded by locks, cameras, and one very sharp kitchen knife I'd started keeping in my nightstand. Safe? No. But prepared? Yes. Me to lawyer. I feel ready. That night I told Sarah everything. The messages. The threat. The lawyer. Her face hardened with every word I spoke. Her jaw clenched tight like she was ready to fight Ethan herself. You should have told me, she said, pacing the living room. I would have handled it. I shook my head.
No, Sarah.
I'm handling it. Her eyes flicked to mine and slowly she smiled. Not the soft, comforting kind of smile. It was sharp, proud. Damn right you are, she said, nodding like I'd finally passed some test I didn't know I was taking. The next morning, I woke up to another message from Ethan. But this one was different. Ethan.
I'm sorry.
I went too far. I just want to talk. Please, Lauren. I miss you. He was starting to crack. I could feel it through the screen. The confidence was gone. The control was slipping. He thought he could break me, but now he was the one breaking. I didn't reply. Later that afternoon, my lawyer called. Restraining orders been filed.